Let's
That
hear
was
your
such a
intro
great
one more
opening.
time.
Yeah, sorry everybody. So I was just saying, as I was watching people coming in, it was great to see a couple people from the Cleveland area, which is where I'm at today. Our home base marketing institute is based in Cleveland. So I'm really looking forward to this. I love the Q&A part. So looking forward to hearing from everyone and the questions you all have. And hopefully we can address a bunch of those questions today.
Excellent. Well, here is a quick preview of how we will spend our time together today. First, Paul is going to set the stage by distilling his years of AI research and enterprise business design into the 5 things you need to know right now about the state of generative AI. Then I'll join him for a fireside chat. And after that, we'll have some time at the end to take your questions live. So, like I said earlier, please use the Q&A widget and we'll try to get as many to your questions as possible. All right, that's enough of the intro. Let's get to the good part. Paul, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thanks again, Courtney. Really looking forward to this. And as Courtney said, the way this is going to work is I'm going to do a pretty brief overview here, about 10 minutes of just sort of setting the stage for where we are with AI today in business and communications and marketing and kind of what we can do from here. We'll talk at a macro level, but hopefully get into also a very tactical level so that we can apply this information starting today in our careers and in our businesses. So I started the AI Institute in 2016. I started researching artificial intelligence in 2011, trying to understand its application to marketing and business. And what we have seen, I've met with many of the biggest companies in the world in the last 18 months, since ChatGPT in particular. There's been a lot of demand and interest in understanding AI. What we keep seeing over and over across businesses within different industries, certainly within educational systems and throughout society, is there's a lack of just fundamental understanding of what AI is. And that's causing that lack of kind of literacy about AI is causing a lack of like optimal strategy around it. And so for a lot of organizations, ChatGPT, November 30th, 2022, when it came out, was the origin of artificial intelligence to them. Now, AI goes back like 70 years as an area of research and study, but ChatGPT opened everyone's eyes to what was possible because it gave everyone AI they could actually interact with themselves. It wasn't just theory anymore. We could all actually go in and use this technology. So, what I want to do with you again in our short time up front here is just talk about some fundamental things that you need to know to figure out how to apply this to your career. So, number one is AI awareness and adoption are accelerating. There was a very long time where they weren't, it was pretty stagnant. So, for those 10 years or so before ChatGPT that I was spending time researching and talking about AI, we weren't seeing the level of adoption, but we're seeing it happen now very quickly because we've entered the generative AI phase. Not just text, which we're all familiar with through ChatGPT and Grammarly and other tools that enable us to use it that way, but images, video, audio, code. Just last week, Microsoft and LinkedIn released the 2024 Work Trend Indexed annual report, where they surveyed 31,000 people across 31 countries. And they found that use of generative AI has nearly doubled in the last 6 months. And their data says 75% of global knowledge workers are now using AI. So, again, just in the last 6 months, we are seeing this rapid adoption curve. Now, part of the reason that we are seeing this rapid adoption is because big tech is now betting everything on this technology. We're seeing, I think I've maybe lost control of my slides here. There we go. Let's go back for a second. Okay, here we go. So we're seeing not only, let's try that one more time. We're seeing not only the advancement of AI within places like Google and Microsoft and Amazon. So just this week, we saw the introduction of AI overviews from Google at their Google I/O conference. So if you haven't seen them yet, it was called Search Generative Experience prior to this. But we're now seeing these generative AI answers that are going to be infused right into the Google search page. So generative AI is going to be found literally everywhere where we work. Um, Certainly with Grammarly, we're seeing the same kind of approach. So Grammarly uses generative AI as an assistant to accelerate your writing, strengthen your messaging, enhance tone and style of your content, and to help communicate more clearly and efficiently. So the tools that we all use to do our jobs in business and marketing and communications, those tools are getting smarter. And by having access to them, we are seeing these increasing levels of adoption and awareness and value creation within organizations. Now, at the foundation of all of this are large language models. So a large language model is, again, what powers ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, Google Gemini, all of these generative AI technologies that you're experiencing. This is the basis for this technology. Now, what these things do is basically predict the next token or word in a sequence. So you put an input into a tool, a generative AI tool, and it starts predicting what word should come based on its training data. So, because of how they work, it's best to think of these tools as assistants or aids to what you're doing, not as replacements. And when we really start to look beyond the obvious use cases of assisting in writing, there are all these other wonderful applications that can create value for you instantly. So for me, I use generative AI often as an ideation tool to help me develop outlines, to help with my planning. I think of it as kind of like a strategy assistant where I'll bounce ideas off of it. Summarization of long reports, transcription of audio or of video. These are all applications that we as marketers and communications professionals can be using all the time to create value every day in our jobs. The other thing to understand is these large language models are just the foundation for what comes next. The companies building this technology didn't originally develop the way to do large language models to write articles for you or to do editing for you. They were actually a way to unlock intelligence. And so that's really what a lot of these organizations like OpenAI and Google are racing toward is how do we build smarter and smarter models so they develop more general capabilities. And so that has major implications to what we do as marketing and communications professionals. So the thing to remind yourself is this is the least capable AI we will ever have. It is the dumbest form of AI we will ever have in human history. And to understand this, one of the best ways to visualize is to look at the evolution of image generation technology. So if we look at Midjourney, which is an image generation tool, this is a 16-month time frame, 6 iterations of the technology, the same prompt given to Midjourney. On the left, you have the abstract boy. On the right, you have photorealism. This same level or rate of change is happening in text, image, video, audio, code. So all the generative AI categories, they're all accelerating at this rate. But with image generation, we can at least visualize that change happening. To understand kind of where this might go, there's a legendary researcher named Andrej Karpathy. He was at Tesla for 5 years running computer vision. He's been at OpenAI for a couple of stints. And in January of this year, he did a YouTube video about understanding how large language models work. It's a very approachable video. I'd recommend it for anyone who wants to understand at a little deeper level here. But he talks about what are all the AI research labs working on? Where are we going with this technology? And this is kind of a summary. You can see, generating images and videos, speaking, generating music. We're seeing all of this. We heard some of this with OpenAI's announcements just this week, and certainly with Google's announcements through Gemini. We're also going to see AI agents, this idea of existing software infrastructure where the AI can take actions on your behalf. It can go into the applications and follow steps. So this is what we're going to start to see play out, and it'll certainly start to impact marketing and communications. Now, if you haven't seen Sora, this is a demonstration of what's coming from OpenAI, their text to video generation. Google announced something similar this week. Meta is working on the same technology. And so in the not too distant future, you're going to be able to generate these very real looking videos right probably within ChatGPT. You can test this kind of technology today with Runway, so runwayml.com. The other way this is going to play out is the assistants that we have been using, like a Siri or an Alexa, they're going to become truly intelligent. So Apple is expected to make announcements on June 10th at the developer conference about what a next generation of Siri looks like. And so this idea of these AI assistants that can also take action is going to start to find its way into our profession, where anywhere where these steps exist, where you have these repetitive steps to do a task like sending an email campaign or producing a podcast, they're going to be assisted in different ways through AI. So what does this mean to us? We are under the working assumption that at least 80% of what knowledge workers do every day will be AI assisted to some degree. This does not mean replacement of jobs and roles. A job is a bundle of tasks. What's going to happen and what is already happening is the AI will start to assist at more and more of those tasks. And so if you have a campaign you run that has 15 or 20 steps to it, the AI may assist in 7 of them, and it may save you 10 or 20% of your time. And so that's the key moving forward, is the ability to identify the valuable steps or tasks that the AI can assist with, so you can start freeing yourself up to focus on the bigger strategic creative endeavors. So the question for all jobs moving forward is going to be, what will the human do and what will the machine do? And so historically, the software we have used to do our jobs was largely level zero. It was all you. Someone built software, you told the software what to do. It didn't think, it didn't understand, it didn't reason, it didn't create on its own. Now we're moving in, though, to phases 1 and 2, where the AI can truly start to be an assistant to you and enhance what you're capable of doing in all aspects of your job. So what do we do about this? And this will kind of lead us into the conversation and Q&A today. Every organization should follow these same basic principles: education and training. It all starts with comprehension. So look within your organization and find ways to enhance professional development to give people the knowledge and the skills needed to take advantage of generative AI. The second thing that we're seeing a lot of organizations do is creating an AI council that's dedicated to trying to figure out how best to adopt this in a human-centered way within an organization. The third piece, which the AI Council often will play a role in, is developing responsible AI principles, which again is human-centered approach to all this. How do we benefit the humans, our employees, our stakeholders, our different audiences with the adoption of the technology? And generative AI principles that provide guardrails to use it in a responsible way. The fourth step, which is really a leadership play, is think about the impact this has on the different people within the organization. How's it going to affect SEO professionals? How's it going to affect writers and editors and strategists? And start to plan. We have time to figure this out. Jobs aren't going to flip tomorrow and be, completely disrupted by AI. But disruption is coming, and it can be an opportunity, but we have to plan for it. And the fifth thing is to build an AI roadmap, to really start to lay out what are the priority projects, what are the strategies that it's going to affect, how's it going to change our technology stack, to really put that in place. And so all of these steps enable you to really start building an AI emergent organization or department. And so my final kind of call to action here is, don't wait for the world to get smarter around you. The technology is going to continue advancing at a very rapid pace. You can be ready for that. You can choose not to let the fear and anxiety of it take over, and you can actually become a change agent within your organization to help figure this stuff out. Every company in every industry of every size needs people who raise their hands and say, I want to be a part of solving this, because the future of all knowledge work is human plus machine, and that future is happening right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. That was incredibly insightful. And you set a really great picture of what's to come. And we really are at the beginning of, we're just at the very beginning of this AI evolution. So I know that I said no one needs to take notes, but I have been taking some notes as you've been talking, with some questions that I think the audience would love to hear your take on. So we'll dive into the fireside chat portion.
Great.
Great. So first, you gave us some very great concrete next steps, and I do want to get into those. But before we do, I'd just like to talk about, what do you see as the primary obstacles that leaders face when it comes to adopting AI across the enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, certainly some industries face regulation issues, like financial services, healthcare as two example industries where there're just going to be more regulations around their use of these things. In some organizations, there can be legal and IT barriers, so they may be more conservative in their approach to adopting new technology, and often rightfully so. Like, they may be concerned around privacy and confidentiality of data and things like that. But more than anything, what we see as the blocker is AI literacy at all levels. Sometimes even legal and IT, which again, I feel like should be absolutely at the table. And we as marketers and communications professionals and business leaders should welcome the involvement of legal and IT. Oftentimes they don't fully understand how AI can be applied, what all the use cases are. And so they just blanket shut things down versus understanding that there may be a lot of very low risk use cases that teams can apply right now. So to me, AI literacy is just the most fundamental part of all of this at all levels.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you raise about how important the literacy is, because that lack of awareness or understanding really seems like it can lead to a lot of fear in some cases. Fear of doing the wrong thing or fear of missing out or applying it incorrectly. And so I really agree with you about the importance that literacy plays.
Yeah, and I think there's a
Um,
lot of misconceptions. To your point, the anxiety and fear does come from just not really understanding it and not understanding what the organization is doing about it. So if we're not talking as leaders to our teams about how we're thinking about this, then we're allowing these anxieties to run forward. I mean, Grammarly deals with all the time. So many writers and editors use Grammarly every day. But Grammarly to me has always been a leader in the positioning of a human centered approach to this because those writers and editors can be fearful for what the impact will be on their jobs if no one's talking to them about it. And so I think it's not only literacy, it's just trust and transparency.
I 100% agree. I've heard from so many writers and editors as well as students and teachers about concern that, writing is being replaced by AI. But the real truth is, like, at Grammarly, we're approaching it as AI is a collaborator. So AI is a tool that we can use to help, increase efficiency, unlock creativity, challenge the ideas that someone might be writing to ultimately help them improve their communication as well. So you have talked a lot. You've mentioned a few times about regulations and some of the policies. How can a company start putting these policies, responsible AI policies, in place from the ground up?
Yeah, so one of the keys, and I'll try and grab a link. If not, we can send it to everybody afterwards. But we published like a template for responsible AI principles, and I just put it out under Creative Commons because I saw so few organizations that developed these. And one of the key principles we talk about is this need for organizations to have a moral compass because the laws and regulations won't keep up. In the United States, I saw a stat last week that there's over 700 pieces of legislation at the state level currently in the works related to artificial intelligence. The government is certainly looking at things. In the EU, we have the AI Act, which is the furthest along of all regulations. So depending on the country you're in or the state you're in, your regulations and laws are going to be different. And so what really matters right now is that this, again, big picture, overall human centered approach. How do we adopt this technology to benefit the people of our organization? Then when you get into the kind of the policies around it, around the use of generative AI, it can be as simple as what technologies are people allowed to use? Are they allowed to use them for internal purposes or external purposes? When they use these generative AI tools, do they have to disclose the use of them to the audiences? So if I'm using it to craft emails back to you, do I have to tell you I did that? If I use it to generate an image for our blog, do I have to tell people I did that every time? People just don't know right now. And so I think that's the point of the policies is to put some guardrails in place that give people the freedom to use these tools, not restrictions. It's saying, hey, we want you to use this. We want it to benefit you and the organization, but let's do this in a responsible, safe way that adheres to our own policies internally, make sure we're not running into any risks or liabilities related to it. And let's just get that all defined for everyone in a simple 1 or 2 page document so we can move forward and start benefiting from it.
Right, right. And then once you have that framework and those clear principles and policies in place, then your employees can explore it and can discover, knowing their function and the requirements of their job, they can find the ways in which these tools can really help them that somebody else might not have thought of. And so, by having this, we at Grammarly, we have this type of a grassroots effort. While we do have researchers and linguists who are very well versed in like the deep technical underpinnings of the large language models, we also have departments all around the company who are experimenting with using generative AI, following our principles and identifying new ways in which they can leverage it to help them work more effectively, and really unlock that power and potential.
Yeah, and that's great because what we know is, I mean, Salesforce had a study, I think in January, and then the Microsoft and LinkedIn work trend report that I mentioned earlier, both verified people are using this with or without your approval. So I think what they said in the Microsoft LinkedIn report is like 68% of people are just using their own generative AI tools because they're not approved within the organization or they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So it's happening. You mentioned at schools, it's happening there too. Students are using these technologies. So my feeling is let's steer into it. Let's embrace it. Let's teach them how to use them in a responsible way, whether they're students or marketing professionals, because they're going to do it one way or the other.
Precisely, precisely. And really being clear about like these are the risks and this is what's allowed so that, nobody is accidentally, leaking or posting IP to a third party LLM.
Yeah.
Great. So one of the things I want to go back to is you had mentioned setting up an AI council and the importance of having this group drive these innovations. What exactly would this look like if you're starting from zero?
It really depends organization to organization what the function of the council is. So the way I generally look at it is find a small group of people, it can be two to start, who are curious and passionate about AI. They don't have to love it. You can have writers and editors on the team who maybe aren't so sure about this, but they understand it's going to affect them and they want to be part of the solution. So find the curious and passionate people who want to start meeting in a regular basis to figure this out. Now, what you need to decide at an organization level when you get into kind of the charter and governance of this is what is the purpose of this council? Does it have any actual authority to do anything? Is it more of kind of a club that's sharing knowledge and starting to advance learning? Does it have the support of the C-suite where it's actually going to get financial and time resources to drive advancement forward in the organization? So that's going to be on an organization by organization level of what the actual purpose of the council is. But at minimum, it can be an informal thing where some people get together and say, let's start listening to this podcast and meeting once a week over a drink to talk about what we learned each week, or let's all go read this book and talk about it. So it can be something simple. But in an ideal world, the more advanced organizations are going to get C-suite support. They're going to have resources dedicated to it, and they're going to build, maybe it's an overall AI council, or maybe it's a department level council. We've seen a lot of marketing AI councils formed as an example, and then they may like report up to the larger AI council. So complexity of it, the overall scope of it is going to depend on the organization you're in. But what I always tell people is just start somewhere. If it's a podcast club or a book club or taking an online course together, do something to get it rolling and then start building some momentum from there.
Yeah. One question that I hear a lot and that I think about a lot is how do you measure the success? Like once you do get C-suite level support and you are starting to implement generative AI, how do you measure the impact and the success of these efforts?
Yeah, I often think about these as like we'll advise people to start piloting AI. So start with a few pilot projects if you're not already at that stage. And when you go into a pilot project, like any other initiative in business, you want to measure like performance benchmarks before and after. So okay, we're going to adopt Grammarly. We're going to infuse it into our writing and editing process. Here are the 5 main use cases we're going to do it: articles, newsletters, podcast summaries, whatever they are. Benchmark the current process. Here are the steps involved in each of these. Here's how much time it takes to do it. You can assign a value to that time if you'd like. So you have some benchmark. Then do those things using the technology over, say, a 90-day period and look at the improvements in those benchmarks. Is the quality improving? Is the efficiency improving? Are we producing more? Is just the output improving? And then be able to report on those. So at the end of 90 days, you can say, okay, we spent $300 on the subscription. We went from 100 hours to do these 5 things down to 35, and we actually produced more, and the quality we feel is actually higher. Great. There is no executive who isn't saying, let's go all in on that project. So think about it in the terms of how will you get support moving forward? Have the KPIs in place, do the homework, pitch it to the leadership saying, here's how we're going to measure it, and then report on that. And if it doesn't work, move on to the next one.
Right, right. It's a great point. And there are so many models and the technology is constantly evolving. So for the organization, so say you've already gotten to this point, you've piloted it, you've proved the potential, and you have these metrics. What are key factors in scaling AI across different departments or functions?
Yeah, so the scaling literally means just like the infusion of it throughout the department and the organization, where it just truly becomes a natural part of the workflows and processes. And so a lot of that is going to come down to change management. It's going to say, okay, we are all in on this. This is going to become a critical part of how we do this. It's going to affect our staffing, the way we're developing people. So our internal training and education. It's probably going to start to affect our recruiting and the type of talent we bring in. It's going to affect our technology stack. It might start to affect our budgets because The CEO thinks we can do more with less. So maybe our budgets are going to go down, but the expectations are still high. So there's just a lot of things that come from really starting to do this as a team across all campaigns, all projects. Um, and it's mostly a change management thing at that point where you're really starting to figure out, how do we grow the company in this path? What does it mean to the org chart? There's lots of questions that start arising. And my personal experience is I've seen very few enterprises that are at that stage, that are thinking very intentionally about the change management that needs to happen. And that, I think, is the opportunity that a lot of people have to create a competitive advantage in this space.
Yeah. And one thing that can really help that change management is the education and the development by providing those resources, providing the trainings to help employees feel confident and in the new technology that they're adopting. And one other thing that I have witnessed is that, while there are best practices and approaches to using generative AI, it's not always a one size fits all approach across departments. And so what works best and the use cases that might work best in one department might not necessarily be those in another department. So making sure to stay open to that and then, periodically reassessing and making sure to keep an eye on like, how is this actually improving productivity or quality?
Yeah, Courtney, I think that's a great point, because the way I think about it is there's going to be different learning paths within your organization. And so, for example, accounting may just need intro to AI, and we're not really going to aggressively like integrate it into there for another 12 months, but they should have a base level understanding.
Yeah.
Marketing, communication, sales, customer service, it's at their doorstep. Like, we need them deeply involved in this. And so you may create these different learning journeys and do your impact assessments at different levels based on how adoption is going to play out in the different functions of the organization.
Right, right. Okay, this is my last question before we move to some of our live questions. So, if you were to look into a crystal ball, what upcoming AI technologies or trends should we be preparing for the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I always try and avoid the prognosticating, getting into the futurist stuff. That being said, there was so we have the artificial intelligence show podcast that we do. On episode 87, about 7 or 8 weeks ago, we addressed this quote from Sam Altman about the impact of AI on creative professionals and marketers, where he basically said it's going to have a massive impact on people, and maybe even doing parts of their jobs or large parts of their jobs for them. And it created kind of a visceral reaction from people. And so in episode 87, I tried to unpack like what is really happening directionally with AI research and where is this likely going. And so, as we get year to year out, I become, the probability of the prediction becomes less and less. But what I think is going to happen, I'm fairly confident, is these things are going to keep getting smarter. Now, smarter means they're going to get better at reasoning. They're going to get better at planning. They're going to get better at creativity. They're just going to keep getting smarter. And it's going to happen on probably like a 6 to 8 month cycle, where this week it's Gemini 1.5 getting some new capabilities and a new model from OpenAI. And next month it might be Anthropic with something new. And the month after that, it might be Meta. Like, it's just going to keep accelerating. And so just that alone, knowing that these models are going to keep getting smarter, is a really hard thing to wrap our minds around as humans. Like, what does that mean? But the outcome for us needs to be is you can't plan your career or your strategies based on today's models. They're going to change and get better. You have to try and look out at least 12 months and say, okay, once this is possible, what does that mean to our jobs, our roles, our organization, our products and services? And so that's the main takeaway, is they're going to keep getting smarter, and we know that they're likely going to start be able to take actions on our behalf. So as an example, I use this all the time as an example. We use HubSpot. My agency that I sold years ago was HubSpot's first partner. So I've been using HubSpot for 18 years now or so. To send a campaign email in HubSpot takes 21 clicks at minimum. That won't be the case in the not too distant future. So we'll start to see this repetitive tasks start to go away or be heavily assisted by AI agents. And the AI is just going to get smarter, more reliable, more valuable within the organization.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time to be working, I mean, in technology, but also just in the world, given the huge, huge impact that this AI has on us.
Yeah.
Um, All right, so we're just about that time. So I'd like to turn it over and start taking a few of your questions. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. I hope our moderators forgive me. Um,
I didn't turn my
so
mic on for the first minute. You're clear. You're
All right,
good.
well, you got an extra go on your intro, so you had a practice chance. Okay, so before we go into the Q&A, I want to suggest another next step, setting up a custom demo to learn how your company can use Grammarly to adopt and scale generative AI across your enterprise. We have a team of product experts that would love to show you how, so please just fill out this poll and we'll be in touch to get that scheduled. Excellent. Okay, so now it's time for the Q&A. I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking to see the chat or everything that everybody's asking in the Q&A. So here's one question that I really love, and I've seen a few centered around this. Do you see AI completely taking over writing, particularly for marketing, or will it always need a human to review, edit, and fact check? And
No,
there's a real, oh,
yeah,
go
it's
on.
not taking over writing. Like there's certainly, if you wanted to, if you want to run an organization that does just output AI generated content, you certainly could. Um, that doesn't mean you should, nor that it's actually going to be the right choice, because in the United States, if AI generates something, you can't own a copyright to it. So if you're talking about like a media outlet or a publication that's using AI to write articles, they don't own the copyrights. If you use an outside agency or freelancer who generates things with generative AI, you don't own the copyrights to it. So there's like this fundamental legal thing that's like, well, it makes no sense that we would let AI just replace writers. And second, there's no replacement to date for experience and expertise and like taste, for lack of a better term, of like what is good content. You still need to have done the hard work. Like I came out of journalism school. Like I'm not an, I guess you could call me a geek, but like I'm not a technical geek in terms of like I'm not a machine learning engineer. I'm not a data scientist. I was a writer by trade. And so for me, there's an art and a science to writing that I see AI as an assistant to. I really just don't see a path forward where it replaces the need for writers at all.
Yes, yes, I 100% agree, and that's the stance that we take here. One related question from Lauren
Mhm.
is, I have heard of companies noting on their content that it was created by a human because people are suspicious of AI generated content. If you use AI for ideation, can you still claim human authorship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an IP attorney, but I've interviewed them. We actually have an AI for Writers Summit, and I asked these exact questions of an IP attorney. So yes, it's as outline, as ideation, as enhancing what you wrote, making it more professional, adjusting the tone, making it more empathetic. These are all great uses of AI. It's when you go in and give it a prompt and it writes the 1,000 words and you hit publish, like that's what we're talking about here. Is like we don't want it just doing the job. You don't learn anything, you don't add anything. So, yeah, I think looking at it as ways to enhance what you're doing, make you a better writer. My hope is that it democratizes writing. It gives people who didn't have a voice with words a voice, because there are some of us who went to school for it or were just naturally gifted at it. And we have the way to convey information. We have the way to convince people of our ideas and our beliefs. We have the way to make an impact through words. There are a lot of people who don't have that. And so, kind of like AI is going to democratize the generation of art, the generation of music, the generation of video for people who didn't have those abilities before, like me. That is not my thing. I now can, but it's going to take the people who were already writers and make them even better writers. And so that's how I look at it: is it's going to raise the level for everyone, make everyone probably a good writer, but the people who are already good to great writers are just going to like use this to level up what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's very well said. And free up time for them, going through and doing some sort of, very minor sort of revision or editing and be able
Yeah.
to create something, move on to the next project, move on to the next piece.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about what to do, what you should do to adopt AI across the organization. But someone here is asking, what are the big mistakes to avoid when adopting AI into your organization?
I mean, the first one that just comes to mind is some of the stuff we talked about earlier is just misusing it without an understanding of how these things work. So we've seen so many stories in the media about people like attorneys, for example, creating, legal briefs for judges where they didn't realize that the AI might make up sources. So just understanding they're not perfect, they hallucinate, they will make up facts and people and places and things. And so you have to just be aware of what the limitations are. And how these models work, the data you're giving them. So, you can't oftentimes, depending on the tool you're using, you don't want to put confidential information in them, or you're a patent attorney. You certainly don't want to put patent related information into these things. So just understanding how they work, understanding what the guardrails are to make sure you use them safely and properly. That's the first thing that I always think about is just proper use of them so that you get the value without the risk.
Yeah, this leads into data privacy and security. We've had a ton of questions around this. Here's one question that is covers a lot of what people are asking about. Can you talk about ways to prevent and protect your private data and share strategies to mitigate risk when using new tools, or even how to validate that a vendor is doing it on your behalf? And one thing that I will say is that, don't just trust any tool that you find, because you don't know unless you've actually done the research and looked at their terms of service and the policy. You don't know how that data is being used. You don't know if the data sent to that service is being stored, if it's being, securely stored even. And so this is something that is really important as a company too. Like, if you are using generative AI, is to make sure that you do your due diligence and make sure that the data that is being sent to the service is being, either anonymized or securely stored or not stored at all. Because it's a big gap that a lot of people are not aware of, is that the data that they send can be, may not necessarily be responsibly used. And this is something that, at Grammarly we have a very clear privacy policy. We want to be very clear with our users how their data is being processed and what security measures we put in place to make sure that all of their data is secure and that their privacy is maintained. But in this age of big data, it's a really big, it's important to keep an eye on this.
Yeah, and I can't give a better answer than that. I think the theme there is work with trusted providers and lean on your legal team to make sure the terms of service protect you. There's going to be hundreds or thousands of amazing looking AI tools popping up all the time. Just add them as a Chrome extension. If you have no idea who that company is or how they handle your data, do not install. Like, that's my first thing.
Yeah, that's the same thing I tell my 11-year-old.
Yes.
So here's a great question for you, Paul. This one's from Stephanie, and there's a similar one from Michael. What can folks say to stakeholders who resist the use of AI because they view it negatively or are fearful of it?
Make a business case for it. What I always tell people is understand the underlying fears, understand the underlying concerns around risk. Like, what is it that's causing them to not want it to happen? And then bring them a use case that does not have anything to do with those things. So if legal is telling you you can't use generative AI, you can't go get a license for this, then understand clearly why that is. Maybe it is concern of the data or whatever it may be. So if you can go and say, listen, here's 5 use cases for marketing communications, we're not giving them any data. We're going to give the examples of previously published reports or posts or transcripts. It's all public data. There's nothing that's going to leak into these. Can we get approval to do these 5? Here's how we're going to measure. And so just steer into it. Again, it can be very frustrating to deal with these obstacles, especially in large enterprises. Just work with it. Like, find the ways to help them say yes to the next idea. Like, just prove the value. Don't cause more friction than is needed. And let them be an ally in this. Again, I know that that's not how it's always worked with legal, but I don't see any other way here. Like, you really have to steer into this, especially in bigger companies or heavily regulated industries.
Great. Well, on that note, I think that's a great note to end on, Paul. Thank you so much. You've brought some very concrete actions that folks can take to start to bring and increase the use of generative AI in their enterprises. So Paul, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. Why don't you share where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. It's been great. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so reach out. Let me know you heard this on LinkedIn, heard us, and let me know. I'm also active on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days. And you can follow along in the podcast each week. So the Artificial Intelligence Show is our podcast. It's a great way to keep up on everything that's going on in the AI space.
Excellent. And for us at Grammarly, if you answered our poll earlier and want to talk to a product expert, we'll be in touch with you. For everyone else, we'll send out a recording of this webinar, so keep an eye out for that. And finally, we love your feedback if you have just a few minutes after we close. Thank you so much for attending, for the great questions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Paul. I enjoyed our
Thanks, everyone.
conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it.